Sure. Well, I think that a plant-based diet is definitely profoundly effective in health in a person's body. Though I am not a vegetarian myself, I definitely think eating vegetables are the component. That's the thing we want to think about, is having those 5, 9, 10 times a day, having some kind of vegetables in your diet. And that all lowers that whole concept of the inflammatory process and the immunity in the body. So very pro veggie. Vegan diet, I have patients who do that. I mean, I don't have my patients do that as a diet. I think there's obviously some benefits to it. There's actually other things. One thing that kind of just comes to my mind more is a question as we evolve as humanity, that there's never been a human society structure that's never had a relationship with animals. We've always had that in our genetic wisdom or knowledge base, of having some type of relationship with animals. And so we're obviously needing possibly some types of nutrients from that. Now, obviously the economics of animals and how we produce them and all that is, horrific if you start getting to the details of it. But I don't necessarily advocate full-on veganism as the ultimate health, because it's all individual. It's what a person needs. So I'll just kind of leave it at that part.
For children that I see, there's so many of them have food allergies, particularly gluten and dairy. It's just profound. And it becomes really difficult for families to figure out what to feed their kids. So I do have the families give them meat protein. I myself do eat meat, but in small amounts and only free-range organic meat. I don't buy it very often because it's wickedly expensive, but I do eat it and I stretch it out, and I teach my families how to do that, because meat is a great source of protein for growing children. You don't need a lot, and so I talk to families how to do it, like using turkey chili. You just need a little meat. It'll feed an entire family. You could eat chili all week long. So that's what I recommend. You can live very nicely on a plant-based diet. I've worked a lot with a woman that I live near, Patty Brightman, who's written a really nice book about vegetarian diet, and I do recommend a lot of books for parents that if that's the way they choose to go. I just have, hopefully the kids don't have profound allergies, which includes soy and nuts, and then it gets really tricky. It's very individualized, and with what I'm recommending. I tend not to recommend vegan diets for small kids. I don't think sometimes the protein's just really hard to get in them. But I'm not opposed at all.
Ditto to what Moses and Michelle have said. I don't routinely prescribe or recommend vegan diets exclusively because I'm afraid of people cutting off other sources of concentrated nutrients that they need. And but I do support people who want to eat more of a natural, a plant-based diet, and I think that's one big advantage that a vegan diet does have. That being said, I've had teenagers in my clinic who were kind of rebellious vegetarians, but Diet Coke and pizza is not the way to go if you want to be a vegan. If you're going to be a vegan, at least be a smart one. So if people want to do that, and if they're looking at more of a plant-based diet and they're getting the things that are typically missing in a vegan diet, which is the B12, the protein, and some of the other trace minerals, then I'm fine with that. But they just have to be smart vegans. Yeah, thank you. I get that question a lot, and I'm sure people are probably confused because, especially in the last 6 months, there's been a lot of press about articles saying vitamins helpful, will reduce rates of cancer and heart disease, and then next month comes one, no, vitamins bad, increase rates. So it's very confusing. A lot of it's how people interpret the data. I do the 4 or 5 Ps, and I feel it is a personal thing, but I'll take a basic dietary history for my patients, and if they're not getting any veggies or whole grains in their diet, I can pretty much guarantee they're not getting it through their food. So is it better for them to take it in a pill? Maybe. I consider vitamins and supplements kind of nutrition insurance for folks who are really just not getting it in their diet. And especially with the one slide I mentioned, if people are on medicines like steroids, like metformin, like hormones, and I know that there's a very good chance that those nutrients are being depleted in their system, they probably are going to need some help with a supplement to really get it back in their body, because I don't want them to suffer the adverse side effects of if they're needing to be on those medicines. But I would much, much prefer to get in food form. And if you look at any study that compares vitamins from a pill versus vitamins from the carrot, from the kale, from the natural source, hands down, food always wins. Always wins.
I need to echo what Wendy said. I tell my patients the same thing. I'd rather you spend your money on quality organic food than buying supplements. Well, why is that? But supplements are expensive, and if they're synthetically made, they need to be processed by your liver. So we're doing more green pharmacy. So then I look for food-based supplements for children that are GMO-free, GMP-made facility, and they're food-based. Now, those I can tell you are wickedly expensive. And so what I try to do is just change the diet first. Take out the offending foods, if there are any, switch to a completely organic diet, and most kids, about 20% of the ones I see with those digestive issues I talked about, just get better just from doing that alone. If those that don't, and I need to supplement, then they're my big ones that I look at are vitamin D, a big one, really important for immune function, as I mentioned, and the kids with the immune issues that I was talking about. And then there's a whole thing about vitamin D. Omegas, I am having angst over omegas and fish oil and heavy metal issues, so I go back and forth on omegas, I've got to tell you. It depends on what day of the week you catch me. And try to do it through diet. Flax seed oil, sometimes I put in instead of omegas, not always a great substitute, but you can't, some kids do need omegas, and I go sometimes to fermented cod liver oil from a certain company, also very expensive. So, and then most of my patients, if they don't eat fermented foods, most kids do not like fermented foods. I do have them on probiotics, and then it's tailored for depending on what condition they have. So I try to keep kids off of supplements unless I have to.
I think kind of going back to the vegan aspect is that, you know, especially with fish oils, I think are probably really important, and the idea of omega 3 is probably a really key nutrient. So we are the only mammals that can't make essential fatty acids. So the bats and the opossums, they can all do it, but we can't, and we need to get it from food sources or from animal sources. And omega 3s are, you know, there's tons of studies that show how healthy it is to have those in our diet. And the problem with something like a flax seed oil is that it takes like almost 15 biochemical steps to get to this happy chemical called prostaglandin E3. And as the human mammal, we just don't really convert well. So if you are vegan, take the flaxseed oil, but you're really not getting a strong therapeutic dose. So that's something I think that's a basis for most people is have omega oils, so omega 3. And so I like the cod liver oil. There's actually an overabundance of cod out in the fisheries, in the oceans, beside the fact that there's lots of problems with the oceans. There's not a lot of krill out there, so I don't really think krill is all that amazing. It's kind of a little bit more the marketing of this past 2 years that are happening. It's definitely beneficial, but economic-wise, just straight old what grandma gave you, cod liver oil with a little strawberry flavor, and it's very helpful. So that's something I kind of think is really important. Vitamin D, and 2 herbs I think are great are turmeric. So I really love turmeric. If you like curry, eat curry as much as you can. And then green tea is another huge, amazing beverage and plant that has a lot of benefits. So those are kind of my favorites.
In theory, yes. So if you're buying organic, it should be non-GMO. However, we know that there are certain plants that their seed spreads far and wide, such as corn. And unfortunately, like corn seed that's been GMO, has been genetically modified, has been found like 1,000 miles away in fields in Mexico. And that's through the work of this one guy in Berkeley named Ignacio Chapela. And he's at UC Berkeley. So, you know, I even spoke to Mark Squire. He owns the Good Earth. It's our local food place in Fairfax, where I live. And he said even though he sells organic corn, he thinks it's about 5% contaminated. So the answer is yes, but we're seeing contamination.
So I didn't put a slide, but the wheat, if you go up to its mother and father, and then basically it's a cousin of wheat. So it has the same mother and father of oats and wheats. So there are some types, the more processed an oat is, the more gluten you're getting into it. If there's a publication, Alternative Medicine Review, and if you go to Alternative Medicine Review and they have their journals, they had a whole thing on the levels of gluten in oats. And so the more steel cut was very, very low, and then the Quaker instant oats had much, much higher. And there's a whole like 5, 6 different types of oats that they studied, and it shows you the different levels. If one is truly celiac and has wheat, or gluten issues, then oats are probably off the table, because unless you can really be sure that there are no oats, they're going to have an immune effect in their body. So for people who just are sensitive a little bit having wheat products, oats are probably fine. Going with steel cut, or then soaking them, or take the whole oats, soak it the night before, and then warm it up in the morning.
Similar to what the panel's already said, if I know people are not getting really good oils in their diet, that's one where doing an oil change is really helpful for the human body, not just your car. I'm a chef, so I like to, again, have my patients and colleagues cook their food, not just get it all through supplements. I love good old olive oil. It's shelf stable. There's a lot of actually anti-inflammatory benefits, especially if you get the extra virgin olive oil, which is actually some of it actually is grown here locally in Sonoma County. And it's available and it's affordable. So for a lot of my patients, it's a beautiful option. I much prefer that than the generic vegetable oil or corn oil for cooking, because those have higher rates of unstable fats that will turn to trans fatty acids. And I'm sure most of you know what trans fats are. They're probably the worst, most inflammatory fats we can put into our body. So number one, if you're going to cook with olive oil. The only caveat is that you need to do low temperature cooking. Don't let it smoke on the stove, otherwise you're going to start ruining some of the oils. As far as patients who have a lot of inflammatory disorders, my folks with arthritis, my folks with any kind of knee problems, back pain, and honestly, even with depression, mood disorders, there's going to be a fair amount of inflammation going on. And I think some of the most powerful oils I could prescribe are the omega-3s. There are vegan-based ones if people want to avoid the fish oils altogether. And again, there is a lot of controversy about fish oils. But I would choose omega-3 fish oils over some of the pharmaceutical medications, hands down, any day, and probably throw a little bit of turmeric in there. But there are vegan-based omega-3 supplements that are made from algae, because that's where the fish get it from. So flax oil, unfortunately, is very poorly converted to the most powerful omega-3s. So I'm going to shoot for the high DHA and EPA oils that contain those. Coconut oil is, from a culinary perspective, it's very high saturated fat. It's about 97% saturated fat. So it's very stable. You can cook with it. It's not going to turn into bad fats because it's already saturated. And there are anti-inflammatory benefits of coconut. The challenge is that the body probably only has a limited amount of how much we can convert saturated fats. Most of the saturated fats in coconut oil, at least, are ones that are short and medium chain. So they burn more like the fats in olive oil. So that's actually kind of a nice thing about coconut. But the body may only be able to digest a couple teaspoons at a time. I know people who are doing gobs and gobs of coconut oil, and I think it's a little bit as good, maybe too much. Our body can't handle that much, and it'll just act like a saturated fat.
I'll just party on that one. Okay, well, I'll be clean. I'll be clean about it. So what has happened is that Monsanto, who makes a majority of GMO seeds, their main guy, Robert Taylor, who is high up in the Monsanto chain, was their legal counsel, became one of the head of the FDA Food Administration, and Obama put him in. So we have a marriage between big companies, such as Monsanto, and our government. So it became like this. This is what happened. So there's an infiltration of big business in the government and lobbying. So that's one issue. Clarence Thomas used to work for Monsanto, and he sits on the Supreme Court. Yeah, I know. That's what I say. So, so we have that problem. That's number one. The second thing is that the government makes a lot of money off of this relationship. Monsanto's goal is to own all the seed, right? And they'll tell you that that's what their goal is, to own and patent all the seed, so that if a farmer gets some GMO seeds on their fields, and then Monsanto has sued farmers, particularly in Iowa, saying that they took seeds that they didn't purchase. This is a big issue now in front of, recently, about 6 months ago, in the U.S. Supreme Court. This was a huge Canadian case from a Canadian farmer who went all the way to the Canadian Supreme Court regarding this issue as well. So these are some of the battles. It's food as money as politics.
It's in Europe. There's a lot more, regulation than GMO as opposed to the United States. So I always say, who's first, the people first, or is the economics first? So I think it's just, again, having that holistic perspective of what's in your diet. I mean, again, not just grains cause inflammation. We also think about like nightshades, so tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, peppers also can increase inflammation. It's specifically called arachidonic acid, and that has causes lots of trouble in your body. So it's not just grains, it's really other types of foods, and you can also go to the heavy meats. Meats also, red meat specifically, increase arachidonic acid. So, and all those are just very pro-inflammatory types of foods. So the talk was a little bit about grains, but obviously there's a lot more things that are out there. And then you can get into psychoneuroimmunology. How our thoughts create, our immune system, and how our thoughts create more inflammation, willingly or not, in our bodies too. So it's not just grains.
I'll take salmon, for example. Salmon were meant to swim in very cold, deep waters. It's one of the reasons why they have high concentrations of those beneficial omega-3 fatty acids, because omega-3s are very flexible. If you put a bottle of olive oil in the fridge, what happens? It solidifies, right? So you wouldn't want olive oil flowing through the veins of fish, because they would swim in cold water and they would basically freeze up. So the omega-3s, which give it the powerful benefits, also allows for a lot of that fluidity. So salmon should be swimming in very cold waters, go up, a stream to spawn, and then complete their lifestyles. That's natural. Nature intended them to do that. If you take that same salmon and put them in coastal waters, and if all of you were fish, salmon in a farm, you'd pretty much have that much space to swim around versus the whole Pacific Ocean. So what they do is they're adding antibiotics to that, because this much concentration of beans in a spot would promotes disease. The fish are so stressed, they're losing their natural coloration, so they're actually artificially coloring. People who fish farm for a living can actually buy a palette of how orange you want your fish to be colored. And they're actually losing their omega-3 content because they're not having the advantage of swimming in those deep waters. So it's a challenge. And then the flip side is, how do we feed populations of folks? How can people afford fish if they can't get the wild salmon that costs $27 a pound, yet the Atlantic salmon farmed is on sale for $8 a pound? It's a dilemma.
I'll begin, since children are my passion, children and animals actually, and I think this is easy for me to wrap up here. So I think for a take-home message, what I would tell my audience, my patients, is the following: that our children are not well. It's a huge population of them. I think we can turn this around. I think we need to practice the precautionary principle and do no harm. And even if we don't have all the studies to back up all the things that I mentioned today, some of them have studies, some don't, then we have to wait and pull it out until we know better, and not treat our children as scientific experiments or lab rats. So that would be my first thing. I think the second thing also is that just treating your own child, your own family, your own grandchildren is not enough. That we have to activate the Moms Network and start making changes at our community. Now, I know we're all busy, we're all working, I get it, but I think everybody can do a small change. So what I ask my patients to do, yes, you heard me talk about the power of the purse and to buy organic, buy local, buy from your farmer, of course. Absolutely. But in addition, I wish that everybody could just do one more step, no matter how small that may be, is to create a positive change for children by getting them to eat better.
Thank you. Would like to go next?
Well, I think the way I think that's important to look at life. I mean, everyone has their own ideas about life, but be, true to yourself, be authentic to yourself. Think about the decisions you make, every day. Take a moment and pause and think about a decision instead of reacting to the things and to all the statistics and all the good and the bad stuff that's happening in the world. Pause and reflect, and then think about what's simple. What can I do? What can I do that to help someone else out? What can I do to help myself out? And by making these small conscious choices, again, the mass of us, we will hit the critical mass, and then we won't have as much ills in the world. So.
I mentioned this briefly in my talk that we're not static beings. Every one of us has the power to activate our own wellness, whether that's the food choices we make, whether it's choosing, do I really need that antibiotic, or is there a more natural way to heal myself? Is there something I can do to boost my immune system? Can I be kinder to myself? Do I, the power of just being kind to yourself and activating your own healing response. Trust yourself as your own best physician first, and find the like-minded colleagues who are there to support you.
Great advice. So let's give the whole panel